Mr. De Niro, began Roberts, his voice cold and measured, you stand accused of misappropriating funds intended for charitable purposes. Your public image and influence hold no weight before the law. This court demands facts, not fame. De Niro stood resolute, his gaze fixed on the judge. The attendees, attorneys, press representatives, and a few observers, held their breath. All knew Roberts as a judge whose decisions in the Supreme Court, particularly in cases concerning constitutional liberties, had set precedents for decades. His ability to dissect arguments was impeccable, yet De Niro appeared unwilling to yield. Your Honor, De Niro replied, his voice low but clear, imbued with a restrained power that recalled his ability to captivate audiences. I hold the court and your role in the highest respect. However, I stand here not to rely on my public persona, but to defend the truth, grounded in facts and the law. Roberts narrowed his eyes almost imperceptibly. Despite lacking formal legal training, De Niro submitted a motion to review the evidence, citing Rule 8036 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, which governs business records. He argued that the financial reports of the foundation, presented by the prosecution, failed to meet authenticity standards due to missing signatures from authorized personnel and discrepancies in transaction dates. He further pointed out a procedural error. The prosecution had not provided a complete chain of custody for the documents, casting doubt on their validity. His arguments were so precise that the prosecution's attorney, a seasoned lawyer with an impeccable reputation, was forced to review his notes. Your Honor, De Niro continued, the prosecution claims I personally authorized transfers amounting to millions of dollars. However, I can prove that my authority was limited to approving general budgets, not individual transactions. I request the summoning of a witness, the Foundation's chief accountant, who can confirm I had no access to operational details. Furthermore, I draw the court's attention to the fact that the prosecution has failed to provide evidence of my direct intent, a necessary condition for establishing guilt under Title 18 United States Code, Section 1341. The courtroom fell silent. De Niro's arguments were not only logical, but demonstrated a profound understanding of legal nuances. He referenced the precedent of United States v. Jones, 2012, a case in which Roberts himself had participated, addressing issues of digital privacy to bolster his claim for the need to verify electronic evidence. De Niro asserted that the emails allegedly attributed to him could have been fabricated and demanded a forensic examination to verify the sender's IP addresses. Roberts maintained an impassive demeanor, but his posture betrayed a hint of tension. He pressed the prosecution's case, citing financial reports that pointed to transfers from the foundation to offshore accounts linked to De Niro's name. Each word was calculated to undermine the defendant's credibility, portraying him as someone who had betrayed public trust. Mr. De Niro, Roberts retorted sharply, your attempts to appeal to technical details do not alter the substance of the matter. You have used your influence to manipulate the trust of the public. Your political views and public activism only underscore your propensity for manipulation. Why should this court trust your words? De Niro did not avert his gaze. Because truth does not depend on fame or position, Your Honor. I have pointed out specific flaws in the evidence and am prepared to prove that this case has deeper motives than it appears. His words hung in the air. Roberts froze for a moment, his face remaining stoic, but a flicker of doubt passed through his eyes. The courtroom stilled as the doors opened, and the clerk announced the arrival of a new witness. An elderly woman, Eleanor Craig, entered, carrying a folder of documents. Her face seemed vaguely familiar, yet no one could place her. She declared that she possessed evidence concerning not only De Niro, but also those behind the accusations. De Niro's expression shifted. He knew her, and this encounter seemed tied to a secret he had guarded for years. Your Honor, Eleanor said, her voice soft but resolute, these documents reveal the true motives behind this case. Roberts struck his gavel, calling for a recess. The courtroom erupted in whispers, and De Niro, without breaking eye contact with the judge, gave a subtle nod. The mystery that had just unfolded promised to change everything. You will not regret your time because in 2 minutes De Niro will say something that will shock John Roberts. Roberts opened the hearing, his voice cold and measured, as befitting decisions that had reshaped the nation's legal landscape. Mr. De Niro, your new witness, Ms. Craig, claims to possess evidence that could impact this case. However, the court reminds you that emotional assertions will not substitute for facts. Your actions, like your public persona, suggest a propensity for manipulation. Are you prepared to present something that will withstand legal scrutiny? De Niro stood resolute, his gaze fixed on the judge. Your Honor, he replied, his voice low but imbued with restrained strength. I do not rely on emotions or fame. I rely on facts that this court has a right to hear. Allow me to present evidence that will reveal the true nature of this case. He submitted a motion to introduce new documents brought to court by Eleanor Craig. These were internal foundation reports which, according to De Niro, indicated that the transfers to offshore accounts were authorized not by him, but by a third party with access to the foundation's systems. Citing Rule 901 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, he insisted on the authentication of these documents through an independent examination to confirm their validity. His arguments were clear, almost academic, causing the prosecution's attorney to nervously review their papers. Your Honor, De Niro continued, I also draw the court's attention to the precedent of Dauber versus Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals, 1993, which you undoubtedly know well. This precedent requires that scientific evidence, including digital evidence, meet standards of reliability. I contend that the emails attributed to me by the prosecution fail this test, as their origin has not been properly verified. I request a re-examination of the digital traces, specifically an analysis of metadata. The courtroom fell silent. De Niro's arguments demonstrated not only a grasp of legal intricacies, but also an ability to improvise, as if he had prepared for this moment for years. Journalists, frantically taking notes, exchanged glances, struck by his ability to hold the court in suspense. Even Roberts, whose career was marked by his skill in dissecting complex cases, seemed to sense a challenge. Roberts, however, did not relent. Mr. De Niro, he responded, his tone growing sharper, your attempts to distract the court with technical details do not alter the substance. The documents you present may be yet another attempt to manipulate the truth, as you have done in your public career. You claim you had no direct control over the transactions. Why, then, does your name appear in every key decision of the foundation? De Niro did not avert his gaze. Because my name was used, Your Honor. I was the public face of the foundation, not its operational leader. I can prove that my signatures on the documents the prosecution considers evidence were obtained under false pretenses. I request the summoning of another witness, the foundation's attorney, who will confirm that I was not informed of the transaction details. This move caused the courtroom to erupt in whispers. Roberts struck his gavel, demanding silence, but his eyes betrayed a subtle tension. He pressed a new argument, citing financial reports that pointed to a connection between De Niro and offshore accounts. His words were aimed at dismantling trust in the defendant, portraying him as someone who abused his influence. Yet De Niro stood firm. He presented additional evidence, correspondence with the foundation's attorney, confirming that he had repeatedly requested audits, which were ignored. His arguments, bolstered by the precedent of United States versus Nixon, 1974, emphasized the importance of transparency in investigations. He asserted that the case against him might be part of a broader conspiracy aimed at discrediting him due to his political views. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened, and the clerk announced the submission of a new document by the prosecution. It was a letter, dated 20 years earlier, allegedly indicating a connection between De Niro and an individual linked to offshore schemes. The letter called into question not only his current innocence, but also the moral foundation of his defense. Roberts looked up, his voice icy. Mr. De Niro, how do you explain this document? De Niro froze, his expression shifting. The letter was genuine, but its context remained unclear. The courtroom stilled, awaiting his response, as the tension reached a critical peak. Something about this case was far deeper than it seemed, and the new evidence threatened to change everything. Roberts opened the hearing, his voice cold and measured, as befitting decisions that had altered the course of history. Mr. De Niro, he declared, the letter presented by the prosecution casts doubt on your integrity. You claim to be a victim of a conspiracy, but this document suggests your long-standing involvement in questionable financial dealings. Do you have an explanation that this court might find persuasive? De Niro stood resolute, his gaze fixed on the judge. Your Honor, he replied, his voice low but imbued with restrained strength that recalled his ability to captivate audiences. I do not dispute the existence of the letter, but I challenge its interpretation. Allow me to present definitive evidence that will reveal the truth and bring this case to a close. He submitted a motion to introduce new testimony, a notarized affidavit from an attorney who had worked with the Foundation 20 years earlier. According to De Niro, this attorney confirmed that the letter was part of a broader transaction in which De Niro acted merely as an intermediary, unaware of the true intentions of the parties involved. Citing Rule 1002 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, he insisted that the original context of the document must be examined to avoid distortion of the facts. His arguments were impeccable, demonstrating not only a command of the law, but also an ability to improvise, as if he had anticipated every move by the prosecution. Your Honor, De Niro continued, I also draw the court's attention to the precedent of Crawford v. Washington, 2004, which you undoubtedly recall, having participated in similar cases. This precedent underscores the defendant's right to confront witnesses. I request the summoning of the individual named in the letter to confirm that I had no intent in those transactions. The courtroom fell silent. De Niro's arguments were not only legally sound but also showcased a profound grasp of judicial strategy. Journalists, frantically taking notes, exchanged glances, struck by his mastery. Even Roberts, whose career was defined by his ability to unravel the most complex cases, seemed to sense that the initiative was slipping from his grasp. Roberts, however, did not relent. Mr. De Niro, he responded, his tone sharp but controlled. Your legal maneuvers are impressive, but they do not change the fact that your name is tied to these transactions. Your public persona, your ability to influence others. These are tools you have used to conceal the truth. De Niro did not avert his gaze. The truth, Your Honor, is that I was targeted because of my candor and principles. I can prove that this letter was part of an attempt to frame me, and I have a witness who will confirm this. At that moment, Eleanor Craig, who had previously appeared with documents, rose from her seat. She presented new evidence, records of an internal audit of the Foundation, which confirmed that the transactions were authorized by another individual, whose name was linked to De Niro's political adversaries. These documents, certified by an independent auditing firm, indicated that the case had been fabricated to discredit him due to his political views. Roberts listened attentively to the testimony, his face remaining impassive. He knew these documents altered the trajectory of the case. After a brief pause, he declared, "The court accepts the new evidence for consideration. However, a final ruling will be issued after thorough analysis." Yet it was clear to everyone in the courtroom that De Niro had prevailed. His arguments, backed by evidence and flawless logic, had dismantled the prosecution's case. He stood, looking at Roberts, his gaze reflecting not only confidence but also the moral strength of a man who had defended his honor. The courtroom erupted in whispers, but De Niro remained composed, his charisma and intellect securing a triumph in this legal duel. When Roberts struck his gavel, announcing the conclusion of the hearing, those present realized they had witnessed not merely a legal victory, but a demonstration of human resilience. De Niro, a man whose career was marked by his ability to transform, proved that his true strength lay in truth and an unwavering commitment to justice.